with Growing with My Fellow Growers. This is Jack Greenstock. I'm going to be your host, and I have a wonderful panel this evening, as always, and a special guest. I'm going to start off by introducing Dr. MJ.
Hey, Jack. Yeah, happy to be back. I'm Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. Bringing you guys articles, tutorials, and guides on the science and practice of growing cannabis. And I look forward to our guest and our show today.
Thank you for joining us. I want to remind anybody who's made it here already to make sure to click on over to the live chat, because that way you won't have any of the messages filtered out, so you can see everything and engage with the awesome community that comes with us on this YouTube Live. Next up, Spartan Grown.
Hello, everybody. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, all one word. Or you find me on Instagram, on Instagram. You find me on YouTube, all over YouTube, right here with the Cheap Home Grow podcast, or Mr. Grows Grow Show, or Gmail Show. You find me the most.
We're happy that you make it such a regular occurrence over here. We really appreciate your input and your time, because I know you're a busy guy at home and at work. So thank you again for coming. Next up, Matthew Gates.
Hey everyone, this is Matthew Gates, Integrated Pest Management Specialist. You can find my most recent video on YouTube channel Zenthanol, which is the Integrated Pest Management FAQ for September 2020. You can check that out. I take questions from various people every month who make them on my social media, and then we discuss them and the answers and give them back to you. And looking forward to talking with MedicallyFit today.
I am as well. I actually had one of my questions answered on one of your fact videos, so thank you for putting out that content. I appreciate that. I know many of the members of the community do. That's typically my most engaged with content on Greenstock Talks. My episode where I had users write in questions was my most engaged with podcast. So I think it's definitely worthwhile to make, even if people are re-asking the question sometimes. It can seem a little tedious, but I think the information is good to put out there to the community. So thank you so much, Matthew, for doing that. And next up, we have Brandon Rust.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? What's going on, listeners? I'm Brandon Rust. If you're not familiar with me already, you can find me on Instagram at RustBrandon. You can find a link to my company, Bokashi Earthworks. And I'm glad to be here, as always. I didn't think it was going to make it today, but I did, so...
We are glad to have you. I am excited to get my little package. I just put in an order through Bokashi Earthworks for some Bokashi and Microbe Plus and Amino N Plus. So I'm excited to try some of that stuff out with my soil. I've heard only good things from like Hota Herb and other people that have tried some of Brandon's products. So I'm excited to support a panel member and their company. So really excited to see that package come in the mail, as always.
Thanks for the support. Appreciate it. We just got that website launched, so things should be a little easier to keep a track of and send things out. And
you crushed
that
on
website.
Future Cannabis Project. I think you did a really great job. They kind of highlighted you and your grow, and you and Leighton Morris had a great talk. And I think I used a discount code that I heard on there, FCP10, for 10% off. So shout out to Future Cannabis Project. They make great content as well, and love to support all the people within the community. Another great person in our community is our breeder on the panel, Kyle.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm glad everybody's here. MedicallyFit, I'm glad you're here. We haven't seen you in a while. So I'm a cannabis breeder. I specialize in feminized seeds. If anybody's looking for some, I do have a website. The website is the letter P followed by breeding.com. If you'll look at anything I'm kind of working on, you can look at any social media platform at Predicated Breeding. I have a bunch of new phenos I just harvested that are pretty delicious. They're actually curing right now, so I should be sampling pretty shortly here. But I'm glad everybody's here. I'm excited to see how tonight goes. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us, Kyle. I was just joining the chat myself on my phone, so I can type from my own account versus on my computer. I'm coming from the Cheap Home Grow. So as a reminder, you can actually tag me at Jack Greenstock, or you can tag me at Cheap Home Grow, and I'll be able to see you in the comments. We have another breeder with us this evening, and that is the American one. How you doing, buddy?
Hello, Jack panel and everyone in chat. I'm doing good. I'm glad to be here, and I'm excited that MedFit's visiting. He is one of the good people in the community and always seeking out knowledge and sharing it with me and everybody else. So it's going to be a great show. I can't wait.
I am looking forward to it as well. Med was once upon a time on the earlier shows sort of semi-regular panel member. Many of those shows have been deleted, unfortunately, from the Cheap Home Grow, but I do remember those days, and look forward to having your content shared with us tonight. You share so much with me in the DMs, and I've heard from many other people that you share lots of great research papers and science, both about cannabis, but just in about life in general, that can cross-relate to this plant that we all know and love. So without further ado, I want to give a warm welcome to our guest this evening, Medically Fit. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, you can find me on YouTube or Instagram, MedicallyFit both, no underscore, just all one word. I've been part of the YouTube community 2011 when I really joined the community, and it was kind of searching out information. I didn't like forums. I didn't like anything really like that. I just kind of went to YouTube because to me, YouTube was the up and coming thing on where to find information, the how to type of video. And there was quite a few people actually on there putting out information. So that's kind of how I started. And at first I didn't ever really make videos. I was always kind of in chat, just chatting with everybody. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to make video logs, logging my grows for myself so I can kind of go back and see what's going on with them. And after that, it just kind of like I was putting information and some education information to my videos, and people were kind of starting to listen up a little bit. But it took forever for my YouTube channel to even get people to follow it. And once it did, it kind of took off. And now I'm almost at 17,000 followers now on YouTube.
Nice.
It's awesome to see the slow and consistent following. Sometimes it takes a little while to take off, but once people sort of realize that you're putting out good content and good information, they can share it with their friends, and their friends share it with each other. And the good information, I think, always rises up to the top. So I appreciate the stuff that you've sent to me. I always, if I'm have some free time and I don't get to read it or watch it right when you send it to me, I'll go back and look at it later. And I've learned a lot from you and the information that you shared through there. So I'm just really happy that you're able to join us this evening. And I want to give a big shout out to all the people in the chat. I saw Smiley's Garden, Cade Armstrong, and Smot Poker are with us this evening, as well as many more. And if anybody, like I said, has questions, they can feel free to tag me. I wanted to say 2011, that's been quite a long time. The first YouTube video I watched was in like the you said 2011, right? Yeah. But mid 2000s, I think for me was like 2006, 2007 or something that I saw my first YouTube video, and it was like a Kimbo Slice street fight video. And other than that, it was mostly like cat videos and random ridiculous shit. So I wasn't seeing too much cannabis content and information back in those days. So I think you were definitely one of the earlier people putting content out. So definitely appreciate that. And I want to throw it out to the panel and see if they have any questions before we go into talking to the live chat.
I guess I could throw up. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Spoiler.
It's I don't know that it's cannabis related, but I'm more interested in, didn't you move out to do homesteading? Aren't you homesteading now, Med?
No, we've got property that we're going to do that on. When we were, what was it, March of last year, the girlfriend kind of was like, no, I'm kind of getting tired of being in the camper with these dogs. Like, it wasn't a lot of room, we were trying to do it simple. And so she's like, hey, let's just get a house. And I was like, okay, and we'll get a house and we can start building later. But that also opened the room for me to get to 2 of these grow rooms up and going, one for flower, one for veg, now that I can actually start working and doing a lot more work. So
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, we go out to our property quite a bit, check it out, see what we want to do. We've already been pricing like what it's going to take for the septic and the wells out there, and just so we can get going. We already know we're going to do wind turbine more than sun because there's just so much wind out there and it's all the time. And it's just not like, hey, we only get 10 hours of sun today. Hey, we got to figure out how to not use some things today because we're not getting enough energy.
Sour Diesel Tangy in the chat asks, when do they begin to trellis, or how do you determine the ideal time to start trellising? If you do, Med, what do you think is the right time to start trellising?
Well, that really just depends on my strain specifics. Like I'm running some Pounded by Jinx Proof right now that I've let them just get monstrous big and didn't do a lot of training until they got really big and started showing sex. Now I've got a few of the lower branches that are having a hard time staying up, but the top branches are, with the weight of the flower, are still holding themselves up. So I'm not really considering throwing any trellis on like these, but some of my other ones that I ran, what was it? It was a SFVOG we did outdoors, and this thing was just so heavy, we had to have something to help hold it up. So it just really depends on the strain specific.
Gorilla Glue seems to be floppy like that. Spartan Grown, I know you like to use trellis, and one of the things you mentioned is oftentimes people only use one layer, and that could be their downfall. If you're going to use multiple layers, when do you like to start, and how do you go about determining how many layers and when to apply them?
So it's usually the amount, or we'll say the final height of your plant. So whatever you're shooting, whatever you're growing for, whatever that final height of your plant is, that usually determines how many nets you're gonna want to screw around with. For me, the shorter the plant, obviously, the less amount of layers that you need. The shorter plants, I tend to use 2 nets, and then the taller plants, this is at work. And the taller plants, we tend to use 3. At home setting, I use just 1. So it's all, you know, a person, like at home setting, I have a lot less height. So that's why I'm using just 1. So it's all determines really your space that you're in, and how much, because you want to maximize the space, the canopy to the space that you're trying to fill. And so it's hard to answer that question to be applicable, because it can be a different answer for every.
I can say, just from looking at his grow room recently, he has like, I want to say like 8 or maybe 10 bucket company plants just set up basically like in 2 rows, and he's still in veg. It looks like he's just sexed his plants, and I think he's either going to be flipping soon or going to veg them out a little bit longer. But do you ever go into the trellis during veg, or do you always wait till flower, and do you let it like hang up above the plants and then flip and let it grow into the trellis, or do you start to bend actively into the trellis while you're flipping?
I prefer to trellis in flower. My first trellis goes down in flower. It usually goes down day 1 of flower, and I let the plant grow through it. And I'm using the trellis more as a trellis than I am a scrog. I'm using it to support the plant and to spread the plant open. And if it grows too far past the trellis to where it's going to be an issue with support, then I have plant yo-yos that I'll use to take, and support that one branch that I'm having an issue with. But usually I try to time it so that I only have to use 1. But what I would suggest for the vast majority of people is to do 2 trellis nets until you get really used to it. And if you do use that first net early on, like I said, week 1, you can put it in there, let it grow through, and then use that second trellis net for the support. So the first one is just being used to spread the plant out and fill the space that plant is in. And then the second net is just, you just want it to support. So all the bending and all that is happening underneath the first net.
So Spartan, what you're saying would be similar to what I do. When I go to flip and flower, I'll put a trellis like my outdoor stuff. Once the 21 days happen and they get the stretch on, that's when I will maybe add my second trellis just to support everything from that point on. Because I know that 21-day stretch, it may stretch 2 foot and I'm going to need something a little bit higher. So yeah, I understand.
There's a product out there called Growers Scrog Nets for people in like tents. I know Saturdays with Angie, this doesn't apply to you, but they have like double layer and it's like stretchy material, so you can take it off and reuse it from run to run and wash it maybe in like hydrogen peroxide or something like that, or in your laundry machine or something. But what I was going to suggest to Tangi is, because he's got a long and more narrow space, something that I did in my tent, which is also long and narrow, was many of the trellis nets that you buy will be maybe double the width of your grow space. So instead of buying 2 trellis nets, you buy 1 and then find that row that is just long enough to cover 2, and then you cut basically straight down the middle, and you make 2 nets out of the 1 net, and that way you can apply that as your second layer without having to actually buy 2 nets. Or I've even seen people kind of like fold it over up on top. There's a few different ways to go about doing it, but yeah.
What I suggest for netting, and it's probably not popular because the netting is plastic, but what we do both at work and what I do at home is I just buy the width I need, which is 4 foot wide, and I just buy it in a long as roll as I can find and cut my own off. You're going to be far cheaper that way than buying these pre-cut whatever sections.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I've even seen people use like fencing, like that you'd see just like random fencing, like the orange plastic fencing, cheap you can find at Home Depot. As long as there's holes in there, you can grow through it. It's like a lattice style thing, and preferably thinner is better because you're not going to block as much light. But plastic definitely works, and I think that it can be recycled or at least melted down or burnt. I don't know, but it doesn't hold microbial. So if you want to replace it each run, it's like in Spartan's case at the commercial facility, they're not going to use like a fabric net because that can hold more microbials and that'll make their CFU count go up. So those are some things to consider if you're growing to be tested. Most home growers don't have to worry about that, but it is kind of nice to think like what's the lowest possible levels of microbials you could get on your plant if they may be dangerous. Some of them aren't though, unfortunately. So CFU total count might be misguided. Tangi says they're going to wait till day one of flower. So thank you, Spartan Grown, for the advice there.
Oh, yeah, that's the best way. You're kind of using the stretch. So you know that the plants are going to stretch and flower, you know it. So put that net a little bit higher than what the plants are when they go in there, because you know this is going to get higher. And you should be okay. Use that plant to just get it to spread out and fill. What you want to do is for example, if you're in a 4x4 space and you have 4 plants in that 4x4 space, you know that each plant has to fill a 2x2 area. So just think of that when you're trying to fill it. You know, each plant has to fill its space. Use the net to help you do that.
Brandon Rust, you're quiet over there. How are things going over there in Oklahoma, man?
Everything's great. I personally hate trellis.
Cheers, Brandon. That's why I'm quiet over here too.
I don't like
With
it, but I will
those
say
two.
there's hemp trellis now that you can compost. I've seen like the regenerative farms like to do that in Northern California. Each run, instead of like throwing it out or having to reuse it, they just throw it in the compost pile. And
That's not why I don't like it, though. I
Yeah.
don't like my plants being all trapped in there and not being able to access them easy or move them around. And then when you take it down, it's like it's just I just don't like them.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you more, Tao. It's more really about just the locking my plants into jail and then the pain it creates with harvesting them. And you can't really move stuff around. Like I've gotten fairly late in the grow and rearranged colas sort of within my canopy space to better distribute them in a way that a net really kind of interferes with. So you got to use something to hold them up. But I think I'm not a big trellis.
I also would agree because like I just had a harvest where my first plant finished 2 weeks before the second 2. So the
Yeah.
one in the middle, when it finished, if it would have been stuck in a net, it would have been a pain in the butt. But since I don't use trellis, I just pulled it out. And then the last 2 plants had the remaining space to fill out. And it worked extremely well. So personally, I think if you can get away with not using a trellis net, that is definitely one way to go. But it seems like in his setup, it would be pretty ideal if he could just, I think it does increase your yield. I'll say that if you use it properly, I think it can
there's
definitely
other ways
increase your yield.
It's
Yes.
one way to achieve a relatively even canopy, and achieving a relatively even canopy is what increases your yield. There are other ways to achieve an even canopy, though. I'm not sort of pushing back on the function of it as much as just the practice of actually using the net. I think that you can use soft ties and bamboo or something like that as plant trainer and get the same results in a much more sort of flexible outlay. There's some advantages at scale. I think if you're trying to do that, it may make more sense to do it with a trellis. I think that there's a look to it that I think growers sort of like see the look of the net, and something about that is itself attractive. So I think there's an aesthetic draw to it. But yeah, it just gets in the way more than I think it helps. But
I think it's also a simplicity thing. Like if you have 8 bamboo stakes coming out of a Gorilla Glue pot because every single branch is going to flop over and snap on itself, or you have a trellis where you can fill up every single square every single time and just know, all right, I've got 1 branch per each square. Where like training, my plants, I get a fairly even canopy and like most of my stuff is on the top, but there's like 80% is the top, and then there's like that 20% that are like the shoulders, I guess, that
I
didn't
would
quite make
say
it.
yeah.
it's not only the spread out of the canopy, but it does support though. Like in certain strains, if you don't have support, it's just not going to be good at all. So like that Bruce Banner I keep bitching about because it's sloppy. If I don't put stakes in it, it's just not going to be good. And I do believe that just the support alone will help the buds grow bigger, because I've noticed that. And you know, you've seen Kyle Cushman. I don't know if he's still doing it, but he has like 10 sticks in each pod, and he hasn't changed, I don't think. So it can't be all that bad to do it. You know, there's all ways of doing everything.
Well, people often worry about like the root damage from sticking the stakes in, and that's not really a problem. I mean, in fact, it kind of almost helps them a little bit when you do a little root pruning like that. I sort of agree, although I would also just shout out that when I used bamboo, I usually only put 4 bamboo kind of into the corners of a pot. And then I would basically lash other pieces of bamboo using soft ties to that sort of structure to be able to create like horizontal pieces or pieces that like shot off in a direction I needed to hold a particular cola.
Like building a cage around it with
Yeah,
bamboo.
yeah, but then that's individual for each plant, sort of. The big thing about getting the plants caught in a scrog, like you were saying, Jack, is like what happens when the plant in the back is ready to be harvested a week before the rest of the crop, and they're all sort of stuck in the same net.
From my perspective, I also have to agree that I think trellises are fine. The netting is fine. But similarly, I would find this sort of difficult to check for certain pests, and also like what you were saying, Dr. MJ, moving them around and that sort of a thing at scale, I think it makes a lot more sense. I do appreciate though being able to like move them around, but that could be because I'm failing to plan, perhaps. I don't know. But sometimes, plan doesn't survive first contact with the enemy, in this case, the environment, things happen. But yeah, and also like if I want to check the if I happen to be growing in a pot that's small enough, if I want to actually check the root system, that could be a little bit more difficult sometimes.
I really, from the IPM perspective, agree that it's also easier to like remove dead and like decaying leaves that are on the lower side of the canopy or back sides of the plants that might not be getting as much airflow when you're not reaching through nets and like through plants and things like that. Or you can actually pull the plant out or spin it around and work on like every single side of it where it's directly in front of your face. For crop scouting, I think that's important. That's one of the reasons I actually also like pots versus a bed. I do think there's a lot of advantages to a living soil bed, but with pots, if you have a issue, whether it's fungal or pest pathogen, whatever it is, you can pull a single plant out of a row. It's a lot easier to do that than cutting it out of a bed, or even with the trellis situation. Like you could sure cut the trellis, but then it kind of ruins the tension and the support to the plants around it, and it just becomes more of a mess. So there's some drawbacks to it.
There's a couple things though. They could, for one, he's in the bucket company buckets, so he's not moving pots anyway. 2, you can do things like, for example, what I've done is in my home setting is I made PVC frames and do a trellis net for each plant on its own. And then each plant is in a planter on wheels. So I can move my plants all I want until I get to the point to where they're late flower. If they got really heavy buds that have gotten too far past the trellis and I have to support it with a yo-yo, then if I'm using the yo-yo, I'm stuck there. But before then, I'm fine.
Yeah, obviously a monocrop also would help with the not harvest at the same time. You won't have to worry about that. So it's more conducive for monocrop too, because they're all going to be the same height as well. It helps, you know.
Or at least something that finishes the same week or same height.
The trellis helps to combat those issues too by kind of helping everything get to the same height.
I like your idea with the multiple things. There's a guy on Instagram called like 2 Scrogs, and I've seen him doing that too, where it's like he's got his plants on casters and he has scrogs built for each individual plant. And it reminds me of that like quote, if you fail to prepare, then you're preparing to fail. And in Spartan's case, he's doing the exact opposite. He's, preparing for success. And, he's got the idea, well, each plant individually, I want to be able to spin it around and have access to it, pull it out and work on it. And he just got rid of a lot of the problems that you'd see with a traditional scrog or trellis netting situation. But that is definitely more like the craft perspective where you're looking at every single individual plant one by one and working on it like that. I think is something that we have the luxury of doing as home growers. And I think that I'm glad that you brought it up, because we have an audience of people that have access to PVC and could make their own things like that. So
We
great
even
option.
go easier than that. I mean, if you're in circle pots, just get you a tomato cage, and at the very top of the cage, spread your net across the top of that cage and secure it to that. I mean, it doesn't have to be, super, store
Some tomato cages have that. They come with it might not be for tomatoes, it might be for a different plant, but I've actually bought them with that like great it's like a I don't know what you'd call it, a grid on the top. It's just like a metal grid. And if it doesn't come with that, you can use your own garden tie or whatever string. My one buddy had like twine, just literally a ball of twine that he used to make his own trellis with.
Yeah,
So
that's actually what I use at home too, is on my PVC frame. It's the same size as the 2x2 space the plant needs to fill. And then I got screws drilled into it, and I use twine just across the heads of the screws that I've got screwed in there. So I don't have to cut it. I can just unhook it and then pull it through completely, and then I'm done. You know what I mean? I don't have to, then it's just sitting there in a PVC frame at that point.
MedFit, I know one of the things you mentioned was you liked the wind because you felt it built stronger stalks that could hold up the buds and things like that. I also wonder, because one time I had an accident where my fan was on a higher setting than I thought it was, and it kind of wind stressed one of my plants, and it ended up producing the most resin of all 3 plants in the room. And so I wonder, do you think that there's any benefits of like not running a trellis and running kind of the higher wind situation to activate some sort of response, whether it's a stress response or something else in the plant?
I believe so. I mean, if we're trying to mimic nature as much as possible, isn't that the whole idea? Like days like now, we're getting 25 to 50-mile-an-hour wind gust, and I still have an outdoor plant. There's not much I can do about the wind. I've got to let it deal with it and manage it. And until it's ready to come down, it's kind of got to deal with it. If I try to cover it and protect it, I may have something, do more damage to my plant because of the wind gust than, the plant learning to do it itself. Go ahead.
I was going to say breeder Steve, one of the traits that it's kind of a funny term, but he's breeding for erect plants, which can basically fully support themselves in field grown, because he wants to drill press crops and do field planting from basically you drive a tractor over and it's dropping all the seed. You don't need a trellis. You don't need anything. The plant just grows straight up and it can support itself. And that's one of the big features structurally that he wanted to breed for with his plants. And I think that's something to consider, so they don't have to go through all of the labor of having people like ourselves essentially staking up a bunch of trellises or different support systems on larger scale.
And you can definitely find those strains, yeah.
Some of it also comes back to how much silica you're allowing your plant to take as well to help with that cellular structure. And if you're barely using any type of silica product, your structure may be weak and not be able to support itself. And that's one thing, like why I'll use either horsetail, Build a Soil had a recycle silica that was a powdered form that I've tried out. I kind of like it. There's a couple other products that I've used that were silica based beside the chitinase from my plants or from my insect frass.
Do they have like Recycle Sil or AgSil 16?
Something similar to that. I'd have to go look at it.
Eggcell on Bill, so I think it's Eggcell. So.
I have a question: is if there's silicate, like potassium silicate or whatever kind of silicate, is that adding silica to your medium? Does anyone know?
It should be.
Depends on the form you're adding silica either way, but one is plant available, one is not. It would need microbes to be broken down. It's the mono potassium silicate that's plant available, and then I don't remember what the formula is on the other silicate. Is it potassium? I don't know what it is.
Like Armor SI is one, and that one's
it's silicic acid that's a plant available. Most forms of silica require microbial interaction in order to become plant available. So in an organic setup with a good microbe population, I think the answer to this is really different than if you're running in a hydroponic setup with other nutrients.
I'm about to get really bro science-y on y'all. I was watching the Witchy Weekend earlier, and they're talking about crystals. I've started recently using crystals in my pot because 2 grows in a row, I noticed the plant that we put the crystal in ended up being the healthiest and most vigorous growing. And I know that might seem like silly to a lot of people, but I Googled what the crystal was. It's lithium quartz, and that particular thing was made up of primarily silicon dioxide. I know that's probably not plant available because it's an actual crystal, and I don't know how it would mine it or make anything available to the plant, but
Right.
it makes me wonder about what MedicallyFit was talking about with like EH and Redox, and maybe if there's some sort of effect on the electrical charge or the pH.
Crystals
As long
supposedly give off millivolts, isn't that right?
as long as you're not saying that you're channeling the ley lines or anything like that.
I think that's the main path of efficacy, though, man.
We'll have to research that a little bit more.
No, I
I don't know what the mechanism is.
Nothing to add on the crystals.
Well,
Yeah, I
crystals
really-
are actually supposed to have a frequency to them, and each one's different. It's kind of, I guess
Does it
it's
all
their,
matter though?
what's that?
Yeah, light has a frequency. I mean, sound
Right.
has a frequency. Water, everything sort of does. But they also use them in like cell phones as part of the transmitter for your thing. And like liquid crystal technology has been used in TVs for a long time. So I think that crystals have been used
When you
with
get them vibrating,
science.
they have a reliable. That's the whole idea behind the quartz crystal for telling time. I wanted to, if this is a time, or I'd let you guys wrap up your thoughts about crystals, but there was a question in chat I wanted to get to.
I have no more thoughts. I was just kind of throwing it out there because anecdotally, it's a 1 in 9 odds, but I have 3 plants that I take through flower every single cycle. I start with like 20 or 25 at a time and work it down to the best 3.
Yeah.
And of those 3, the one that I put the crystal in, and I know there's, obviously
See,
placebo
well,
effect.
The problem,
Maybe
Jack, is
Jack,
you're not doing,
Jack,
what
do it.
plant has the crystal.
I
This is
agree.
the
I
favorite
agree.
child
But
saying.
I thought that it was not going to work. I was a skeptic, and I was like, this isn't going to fucking work, this stupid ass crystal. And the first time I was like, maybe. And then the second time I tried it, I moved the plant to the opposite side of the room. Like the first time was far left, second time was far right. And I've been using water only soil, same strain versus same strain, etc. So
Well, you guys know my motto. If you know it's not going to hurt and it might help, then might as well do it, especially if it's cheap. And those are cheap. You're getting cheap. So there you go.
yeah, it was gifted to me for free. So I figured, why not try it, right?
There are just other things that vary when we run experiments like this. And one of them that's really significant is just the fact that that's the special plant or the different
100%.
plant. And it gets
Observer
a different
effect.
kind of attention and a different kind of sort of care. Potentially
same-
could. It gets more space. It gets favored in different ways like that too.
And at the same time, if that is the case, if that's what explains it, then still it's a positive effect. So continue to do it. But I would
Yeah, it's like writing like smile or happy or something
Yeah.
positive.
yeah.
Oh,
I would also argue that there's things out here that science still obviously hasn't discovered or hasn't explained, and it will explain eventually, just like everything that comes up. So it could be something as simple as quantum, science, which is way beyond a lot of people's grasp to begin with. That was breaking all the rules, but we still got there eventually. And it could be something that's a dimension that we can't even perceive that it's affecting. So who the hell knows?
Yeah, I mean,
Getting
sure,
positive
but
effects.
as Carl Sagan said, the universe is probably less fantastical than our imaginations would want it to be. But that's, I mean, I appreciate garden gnomes. I appreciate I have a whole bunch of little carved animals that sometimes journey into the garden and keep the plants comfortable and friendly, But I think that it needs to be kept at that sort of idiosyncratic level.
Smart poker's putting his foot down.
Novelty.
Smart poker put his
I think
foot
it's
down.
when
He
we
said,
start
no, my
trying
garden gnome helps.
scientific explanations for why these things work, that it just sort of like, oh, that's a bridge a little far for me.
Well, I don't think he even presented it in that light. He kind of started with a smile to begin with. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. And
I'm still
unexplained,
skeptical. I'm still
he didn't
skeptical.
say he could explain it, just said it was unexplained. So for now,
Yeah, they look nice though. I'll say that.
Yeah.
And the real thing about this is all of those sort of effects that they have on us too, it means that this stuff is sort of working. And I love thinking about how those sort of magical practices end up having a measurable impact on things.
Yeah.
And
Totally
that's
agree with
a
that.
cool aspect of gardening.
I completely agree with that sentiment. I think it's really cool how much of human ritual, and I'm definitely not the first. I know I'm not the first, and I'm definitely not the best articulate in this capacity. But the idea that yeah, that a lot of human-born rituals and practices of like primitive humans and before that. And I'm sure you have a ton of insight on this, Dr. MJ, but how that has a lot of actual basis in reality.
Exactly. Well, and how it has real impacts. And those impacts may not be exactly sort of through the pathway that the people often think. But it has a real social impact or a real sort of practical impact.
Right? Like
when farmers practice magic in their fields, that absolutely, I mean, if you force them to stop doing that, they would have less successful harvests. So I'm completely convinced. And the farmers that I work with do things like make little offerings in their fields and pray to specific saints to protect their fields and other things like that. And I firmly believe that those are like almost as important agricultural practices as fertilizing and weeding and other things like that. It is to them, it is to the sort of experience of being a gardener. And it does a number of things for a farmer, one of which is gives us some feeling of control over outcomes that are normally not controllable. And that's handy and helpful.
Especially in agriculture, particularly.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, like having music while like, like planting your plants, like getting into a rhythm, like it might not be like because the music muses are blessing your crops, but maybe in a way you could interpret it that way because you're getting into a rhythm and you're focused and you're in this actualization state. You're kind of hacking your own brain that way.
You're hacking your body as well. I mean, your heart rate literally increases to higher BPM music. So like electric dance music, it's got that like gets your heart literally going versus like a smooth jazz or a soft classical, which is going to slow your heart down. So if you're at work and you're listening to some like really chill, groovy reggae versus like if you're listening to some more like upbeat, I don't know, whatever it is that gets you going, you're probably going to get more things done and you're probably going to be more focused and do things
I have
like
to
that.
take issue with that. Reggae is upbeat and you can get a lot
Some of
done
it.
listening to reggae. And let me say this, whatever actions you take, and if you know it's the action that you're taking and your plants look happier after you take that action, whether you understand the science or not, I think you should continue doing it. And because sometimes it's like we might find out later that why it does make them happier. So I'll throw that.
Don't apply any neonicotinoids. They might.
I really do,
but not great.
Yeah, I honestly believe that that we affect the plants around us through our attitude, and that's you call it what you like, a psychological connection or whatever, but so I still think there's an unexplained aspect. I still think there's that art. That's where the art comes into growing. That makes one grower better than another, even though they're running the exact same shit.
Secret Life of Plants touches on it a little bit, but a lot of that stuff fails to replicate. But then at the same time, when I meet a happy gardener and their garden is happy and they're killing it and everything that they produce is like amazing, and then you meet somebody who's just stressed out and they can't get their shit together, it's like, and they're, like you said, they could be running the same nutrients, same lighting, same clones, everything, and one person's really making it work for them and the other person's not at all. And it's those little things in between the lines, I'll say, that kind of make the big difference.
Yeah, we give off frequency and definitely give off energy. Have you ever enter a room where there's like a fight going on and your whole thing changes? Yeah.
It is mostly heat energy, like a lot of things, right?
Well, and like body language is 80% like of our communication. It's like they say 80% of your communication is nonverbal. I work with actual nonverbal autistic children, so I'm very like heavily cued into people's body language. So when I walk into a room and somebody was just fighting, even if they like tone it down and like try and act normal, you can see the look on their face. They still have like hormones flowing through their blood. Oftentimes people are so angry from a fight, they might not even cognitively remember what they're arguing about, but they still feel angry like 15, 20, 30 minutes later. It's because your blood is pumping a bunch of, angry, basically hormones and chemicals throughout your body. So even after you're cognitively like, all right, I'm over this, your body is still like in fight or flight mode or whatever. You're trying to like still argue with that person. So you might still feel upset much, much longer after the argument's even over.
I think the combination of adrenaline and cortisol. Or is that how it's pronounced?
Cortisol.
Norepinephrine is part of it too, though.
I think those two play a huge role. Those two hormones.
The fight or flight.
Fight or flight. processing part of the brain.
Well, like height or flight.
Serotonin is too.
Anyways. That's a getting high joke. So
I like that.
there was a question Dr. MJ mentioned a while ago.
Do you still have it, Doc?
Yes, I do. It was a question about auto pots, and they asked why I didn't like bottom feeding, particularly in cocoa. It depends. Different media work differently, and different systems of fertilization would work differently. I think it would be fine, for example, in a super soil. But an autopot designed to fertigate, I mean, anytime you're fertigating with a bottom feed system, meaning you're basically flooding the tray that the pot sits in and allowing the water to wick up into the media. If you're providing salty water, the salty water wicks up into the media, and then the water's removed, the salts can stay behind and just accumulate. And so when you're providing salty water, when you're fertigating, it's important to always top feed and to flush those salts down. Now, you can sort of work around this problem, and the way that Autopot sort of recommends running their gear is a workaround to this problem, but you're going to end up with toxic root conditions near the top of the media that are way too salty, unless you're consistently sort of flushing it out. And so that's why we always have a little bit of runoff when we top feed, is to sort of carry away any extra salts. And if all you're ever doing is bottom feeding, there's no mechanism to remove those salts from the pot.
I think that was thoroughly addressed. I know that some people do run cocoa in the autopot system, and if they just run extremely low EC, or if they're doing like a water only Coco Loco style, like amended cocoa versus nutrient salts like you were talking about, they can make it work. But I think what Dr. said is
you can also just make it work by allowing that salty sort of toxic root condition to develop in the top part of the media, and only growing healthy roots at the bottom of the pot, which is essentially what the autopot sort of strategy that they recommend will result in. I'm just not a fan. You're ending up with a plant that's sort of constantly exposed to really high concentrations of salts in the top area of the root zone, and only has a much smaller sort of healthy area to work with.
Unless you're just running water.
Yes, unless you're just running water. If the nutrients are already incorporated into the soil, then I think bottom feeding or other feeding that uses wicking, the same basic issue for a different reason, I mean, same basic reason applies to like the blue mat system, which is also essentially based on that pressure of wicking within the media. It won't be able to produce runoff, and nothing will ever carry the excess salts out of the media.
So I don't know if we have any more questions from the chat, but kind of going back a little bit to diving deep into the not so scientific, just because I'm in that kind of mood tonight a little bit, I guess. I was curious. We've got one Spartan grown. You wrote in the comments over here on Zoom that we could go to.
Yeah, I just pulled it out, chat.
Okay. I was going to just ask Dr. MJ, have you seen the IKEA study where they I think they call it bully a plant? They have like school kids that say like mean things into a recorder. Then they have school kids say a bunch of positive things into a recorder, and they take those two recordings and they pump them into two plants side by side. And they're in like a grow box that keeps the conditions ideal. They use the same nutrient solution and similar plant from IKEA, I guess. And by the end of like the month or whatever, after they play the positive to the one, it like stays really happy. And the negative one ends up kind of getting droopy and looks all messed up. So I was curious if you had any thoughts on that before I go and read this question.
So it's like
no, I haven't seen it, and it sounds like an interesting sort of promotional thing. But
it was actually replicated with a white paper. They have done this now through.
Yeah, I'd be interested in looking more into that. Sure.
Yeah, well, I'll point out that a white paper doesn't mean it's golden truth,
I
because
agree.
I have a white paper on yoga Brahmic farming. So if you guys want to really make your plants happy, I'll send you that, and you can
I've read that.
all get started. Yeah.
Wait, what is it? What is it?
The yogic Brahmic farm. I think that's how you pronounce it. Farming. It's from. Yeah, I'll grab it for you and send it to you, Rust. I don't know if you do. I think you just
doesn't have a lot of memory on it left. Is it like you have to do yoga with your plants or something like that?
He
You know,
does
I
like
didn't-
his prayers. They stood
Yeah,
out and
meditation
they did their
kinda.
prayers over the plant, over the fields, and then
Mhm.
they did tests afterwards and compared them with controls that didn't get the prayers.
And are you guys familiar? There's a white paper where this woman will take seeds and she'll put a key energy into the seed, and the seed will like germinate within 10 minutes and have like a tail like 6 inches long. So
Has
I
it
could show you
replicated?
that. It says that in some readings that she did replicate it in a few spots,
But not
like
her.
more than
You
once.
can't replicate
but
your own
just her.
study.
No,
You have to have
No,
somebody
I-
else replicate your study, or else it's not replication.
well,
That's the same
she
person
did-
doing the.
someone else witnessed her, like, you know what I mean? It wasn't her study. It was someone else said, let's see if this is
You could
true.
go to a
Let's
magic
do it
show.
again.
And be amazed
Right.
twice in a row, and they're still doing magic. You know, like
Right, you know.
Penn and Teller.
We've
Dave,
fallen off the deep end on this episode, but
Sorry,
it's
but-
fun.
But
Mystic
yeah,
Mushroom
I mean, who knows?
says at Dr. MJ last week briefly mentioned lower branches tend to hermaphrodite. Can you expand on this?
Yeah, flowers that don't get as much energy directed to them from the plant are the ones that are more likely to sort of go hermaphrodite. So if you have shaded out lower growth on a plant, that's where it's most likely to throw pollen. I
Do you know
imagine
why?
everybody on the panel would chime in and probably agree with that
I was
experience.
curious about the dynamics of that too.
I think it's a hormone
well, I've
adaptation.
I think it's really just that those flowers are receiving sort of less prioritization from the plant. They're not able to fully develop as female flowers, and they end up producing male pollen.
So like there's like a
pollen, not
but
male
like
pollen.
is that not like a hormonal process? So like
That's what yeah.
localized?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what's going on at the hormonal level, but I do
Med.
think that sort of it's triggered by that energy grade difference.
MedFit, do you have any thoughts on this here? I feel like I've heard you talk a lot about hormones and different pathways and things. I think you're muted over there right now, but
Yeah, I believe it has to do with hormonal changes within the plant itself. There's been a lot of discussion over time on like, how can a plant change its sex, especially when it goes, how do I want to say, into a hermaphrodite phase where there's no male pollen present. So somehow the plant's recognizing this and it's throwing off these sacs. So that's where, to me, I've always believed it's something with plant succession, that it kind of figured out this over time, that once in a while it had to do something to pollinate to keep its genetic code around. And if it couldn't do it, then it would know it's going to die off. So somewhere, kind of along that line is where I figured the plant kind of figured out how to do that.
So
Well,
do you
I
think-
agree with you that it functions as sort of a safety mechanism for reproduction, but I'm not sure that I agree that this kind of thing would only happen in the absence of males. I think this kind
That
of
was my
thing
question.
happens regardless of the presence or absence of males. We are much more sensitive to it in the absence of males because it becomes the only source of pollen, and we don't want pollen. But I don't think that the absence of males is a trigger for this, for hermaphrodism.
I go
No.
over this in my IPM review video that like the Cannabaceae family in general is kind of atypical in that they have species that are monoecious and species that are dioecious. And I think that, I don't remember what the basal trait is for the family. I want to say it's monoecious, but I don't remember.
I would bet it's monoecious. I would just guess, but that's my guess.
Well,
But
that's
you-
basal for all plants, but yeah, for the cannabis family, I would imagine that would be as well.
That's
It's
you
what it
know,
reverts
yeah,
to
that's a
in
good
nature.
point. But you make a really good point there too, right? Like, but I think that the atypical thing is that in a lot of plant families, this is not usually the case, or at least it's not usually such a big mix-up between the various species and genera.
Well, one
Like
would
what-
think that it has to be hormonal if you can make a female produce male. It's hormonal in some way, right?
It is. It's ethylene linked
yeah,
for
no,
sure.
it is hormonal, but we're talking sort of not just about the hormonal processes of a female plant producing pollen. We're talking about specifically, well, the question was specifically about why is this triggered on lower sort of shaded out branches? It would be, it's going to be triggered there first. So there's a whole other complex sort of set of plant processes
Well,
behind this as well.
To me, that I think
Right.
that comes with the lack of, like we were talking, the stress response in the plant down on the lower sites in indoor cultivation is not getting a lot of light penetration. It's not getting a lot of the photosynthetic properties and actions it's looking for. Therefore, I think
airflow,
that's,
Exactly.
and then
and
couldn't
that's
that
where,
be
yeah.
Yeah.
Go
light
ahead.
is allowing the hormones to be produced, just like secondary cannabinoids? The most terpenes, the most THC in resin is produced on the top buds where the most light is. So I'd imagine that there's also the most flowering
I don't-
hormones that are
Is
up
that
there.
proven, Jack? Because I think there's
Not
plants
because,
that it's potent up and down, and some plants are potent more at the top. Plus, I'll say that perhaps the plant realizes that that branch cannot support and make healthy seed without enough light. So perhaps that's why it's leaning towards making male flowers. I'm just throwing it, a
I
thought
want to
out
throw
there.
something into this conversation. It is usually the top flowers, but it's not because of the light that they're receiving. It's because of the way the plant prioritizes growth within itself and where it shoots that energy. I had a really fun experience with this because I had an autoflower that wouldn't stop growing until it got to the roof of my tent, and I couldn't get it underneath the light. So the tallest cola was above the light, and it still was sort of the densest, most resinous cola on that plant, even though it was up in the shadows above the lamps. So it's not actually being in light that does that. It's where it is on the plant and how the plant is going to distribute energy to grow those flowers.
I don't know. I've witnessed the opposite, where the bud that was not getting any light above the light was growing meager, and even though it was the very top. So
I would
don't
say
know.
that the studies that I've seen, and it's not like well done studies because this was in Prohibition era, but when they were looking at the flowering tops versus the mids versus the lowers, the highest cannabinoid content was always found in the tops of the plant. And they
Were
were
they looking at
typically,
one strain or multiple?
this is like across, like I said, in
varieties?
Prohibition time. So it's typically, they don't even tell you what strain it is, but they're just looking at like, okay, they came in, they chopped down a crop that was illegally grown, and then they're testing different parts of the plant to see how potent it is, and things like that. So
Yeah, they
I would need to
prioritize the
find more
tops
good
because the
studies.
tops are most likely to get sort of pollinated. They're the most likely to be sticking up above the rest of the canopy and all of the rest of that. It makes a lot of sense in terms of sort of evolutionary thinking why they would prioritize that higher and external growth.
One resin in some regard, I mean, we've seen like the UV studies that show like the higher altitude stuff has to create more resin production as like a photoprotectant. It's like a sunscreen for the plant.
Or
It's not
even light
100%,
burn,
but
make that light burn tips on some LEDs. You see the plants, yeah. So that's obviously a light.
So
I've
what
seen
I
that
see,
outdoor now. I've actually finally seen that on an outdoor plant that was grown in a greenhouse with like not a ton of light. So I think there's like cannabis albinism as well as that, because I've only seen that previously indoor under LED plants, or even sometimes like CMH, that little bleached tip kind of looks like the plant flew a little too close to the sun, and it gets like stark white, almost looks like a little piece of popcorn on the top of your bud. But that does happen outdoor, believe it or not. I just this year for the first time saw it outdoors.
Smart Poker asks in the comment, does only one gene control photoperiodism or scotoperiodism really in cannabis? I'm trying to understand some autoperiod stuff. How do alleles work in all of this? And I think that there's got to be more than one gene that sort of influences this effect, but kind of gets to the sort of heart of the conversation, which is like, if you call it a hormonal thing, well, is it a natural hormonal thing? So is it not an exogenous chemical, but is it genes that are overexpressing,
Or getting
various?
turned on by something, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really kind of, as you
Exactly.
ask that question more precisely, you kind of get more questions, less answers, really.
I have a definitive answer, as far as there was a company that had a bunch of money in science that looked into trying to find autoflower allele. Fuck Phylos, I'll just say that right off the bat. But Phylos Bioscience their password was autoflower allele. It got leaked, but they were searching for which would be an autoflower allele. They found out, I believe, that it's not responsible just to one allele. There's several that go into it. And there's not just one type of auto. There's semi-auto, there's full auto, like stuff that will do 24 hours. And then there's stuff that will flower at 18 hours and some that only goes at 12 or 13.
I'll also add that, like,
But they figured it out though, because they're selling autos now, auto hemp.
there's a school of thought about cannabis development that essentially, because of some ideas about where it's originated and what we know about how plants in that area and plants generally kind of over time, especially in the last like 50 to 100 million years, there's a lot of, and I've mentioned before, like the ice caps and like the refugia that was created when like there would be glaciation periods, and then they recede, and then they come and they recede. And through that, a lot of plants would just die through that process over time, but it would sort of concentrate the plants in these refugia. And I think that with cannabis, there's an idea that there might have been some chromosomal like ploidy effects or something like this, or some sort of like kind of concentration of like genes and homogenization, and that might have had an effect, kind of influencing the sort of male female trait disparity, like
I have a
between
question
individuals.
about the autoflower thing. I've experienced at least 3 plants that when they get root bound intensely, they start throwing flowers. What's the cause of that? Does anyone have opinions
Stress.
or knowledge?
I mean, Kyle
Right.
Breeder,
Yeah,
you could
that's
go
one
ahead
of the
and
triggers.
tell us about some of your stress testing and how root binding is one of the things that will cause things to hermaphrodite, even in
not
veg.
no not even it wouldn't hermaphrodite. It would just start flowering like not really autoflower, but it wouldn't hermaphrodite, just start flowering.
Was it male? I'm just curious.
No, well, no, the ones I was talking about are not male, and they definitely didn't have autoflower genetics in them either.
Kyle, are you with us? Looks
Did you
like he may
keep
have
it
stepped away.
going?
Yeah. Well,
Did
when
you
I
keep
would
it going on a
transplant-
veg light schedule?
Yeah, kept it in veg, and then when I would transplant it, it would have a spurt of growth, and then if it got root bound in the new container, it would start, start doing it again.
Did it re-veg at all at that point
Yeah.
when you
Yeah. When I upplanted, it would start to revert to like a normal looking veg.
Yeah, this
until
is
it got root bound again. Yeah.
We had a plant that we let get root bound. One of the plants my wife's grows in the windowsill, and it started flowering. It actually produced some sort of reasonable flowers, but it never really got very. It was never getting 12 hours of darkness. It was certainly throwing a lot of pistils and growing a lot of sort of flowers, but it stayed sort of underdeveloped and then really started struggling with its root binding and other issues. And we ended up just sacking it because it looked like it was going to be crap. But yeah, I was sort of thinking about that plant. I'm like, why is this plant flowering, and why is it flowering so sort of strangely? So I'm curious if you had a similar experience or if they just seem to be going well.
Well, no, and it wasn't like a full-on flower, like you're saying. It's kind of like super pre-flower, like 3 or 4 pistils everywhere, though. And then, like I say, if I upplanted it, it would have a spurt of growth that mimicked regular veg stage growth, And then
we never applauded mine. That's an interesting part of your story, by the way. That when it got more space, it seemed to spurt in vegetative growth. Yeah, I don't know. I think that this may also be some issues with some of these genes that they're playing around with in cannabis breeding now too.
Kyle specifically, I know he's not with us right now, but that's one of the tests that he does for his stress testing is extreme root binding to see if it causes Hermes, to see if it causes auto-flowering or pre-flowering. I know that he's like done stuff in solo cups, like 3 foot, 4 foot tall, and just keeps it in there as long as he can to see like how much stress it can actually handle. And root binding is something I've seen.
That right now. we all have a bunch
solo
of
cup challenge
plants in the party cups right now. I have one that's definitely root bound, and I'm gonna keep my eye on it. See, Let's see if it does anything weird.
I had a question about your grow challenges. I think I might have messed up. Do you have to like sign up with a grow before a certain date? Because like when I went on October 1st to start uploading my low stress training, it like didn't seem to allow me to make my journal on Cocoa for Cannabis. I don't know if I dropped off or if Doc, are you there?
I got
Hear
you.
you too. I just don't hear Coke.
Oh, sorry. I think I was on mute. Am I
Oh,
there?
Yeah.
yeah, you're good now.
Anyways, yeah, so I think you might have gotten confused. The current Grow Challenge is the Plant Training Grow Challenge. It started in August and we all flipped to flowering on October 1st. The signups for that were open until October 1st. And then we flipped, the sign up is now taking signups for the New Year's Grow Challenge, which starts on January 1st. So you might have, I could still get you into a Plant Training Grow Challenge, but we're supposed to be flipping or, you know, initiating flowering at this point.
I flipped October 1st. I just
Okay, so you just need
I
to
have all
get
the photos
registered
and stuff
then.
like photo tagged with the dates and everything. I just didn't realize I had to update or like upload it before the first. I was like, oh, I'll just go and show my veg and like say, oh, I started on this
Yeah,
date,
you're here.
flipped on this date.
Yeah, so the only thing you probably missed doing was registering when we still had the registration up there. So if anybody wants to register for one of our challenges, go to cocoforcannabis.com/challenge. And that page will describe the current or the next grow challenge. And there's a sign up down at the bottom of it. It's always free. It's just that right now it's already for the next one, Jack. So I can get you added to the Plant Training Grow Challenge. We'll get that worked out. No worries.
Sounds good. I didn't top for the first time in literally years. These are the first 3 plants that I'm growing without topping. And I think if I posted live updates of my garden right now, people would be like, there's no way. He definitely topped, because it's like, it looks just like a same flat canopy with a bunch of colas. So
Yeah.
low stress training can definitely work really well.
Yeah, for sure. It's been interesting looking through those journals. So if you're going to join that group, that's great. That's the smallest group right now, but good journals in there. And it's really interesting to see how people train without topping and bending and twisting their plants around.
Much respect to all those people, especially if they're not tying down. I'm in there every single day, bending, moving the plants around. It's like total cannabis bonsai challenge. And I realized that even when I top, I kind of take that technique. Cannabis Can Grow called it like the green thumb method, where you don't have a trellis, you don't have bamboo stakes. You literally just kind of, Kyle Cushman called it cannabis chiropractic, where like you start super cropping from like literally a quarter inch up above the soil. So I crack there, I crack at the first node, second node, third node, everywhere up and down, all the stems. So by the time I'm finishing in flower, there's like chunks of stem that are super like tough and rigid, that are basically like they're super crop, they're just not bent over. And you fill the whole space without having to use any trellis or support. And I don't know, I think it works out really well. Can Grow is going to be, oh, he's in the chat right now. Hell yeah. Shout out to Can Grow. Good guy. He's hopefully going to be coming back with Hydro Hustlers with Miss Nudie on the Cheap Home Grow Network. That's one of our other panel shows. They do a really great job. So shout out to Can. It's great to have you back posting and engaging with us in the community again, buddy. We're going into the second hour. Does anybody have any topics on their mind that they'd like to talk about a little bit? Med, maybe you as our guest, is there anything that you'd like to talk about?
We could talk about Redox.
I have a couple questions for Med that might be Redox related that I haven't gotten someone to answer proper. What do you think about grounding container plants, and does that help or in any way with possibly the Redox? And how about adding a little electric to your root ball to see, you know, if that could help? Is there any? What's your take on those?
So describe the first one to me again. What are you doing?
Okay, well, the theory is, and there's a patent actually that the U.S. Patent Office set out, like plants that are in containers have no connection to the ground, whereas, you know, if it's grown outside, it has a connection to the ground. So they actually sell things that you plug into your outlet that's grounded to, you know, electric ground, that supposedly, you know, and it grounds the soil. And what I've done is I put a thermostat wire, copper wire, I screwed it to where my lightning bolt for the water, you know, like if you get hit with lightning, you have a lightning rod or whatever. In any case, it's grounded into the ground, and I stick it in one of my pots. Since all the plants are touching, I'm figuring it's electricity kind of thing. It's all like getting that ground. something to do with electron loss. I mean, and it's a thing with people too. They say you can run outside and stand barefoot and get grounded, and there's exchange of electrons.
Earth grounding. Yep, earth grounding, where it's just your bare feet touching the ground, so the transfer of electrons between the natural earth and your body can happen.
Right. Same thing with the theory with the plants. So what do you think?
I believe in it. Do I quite do it? No, but yeah, I do believe that there is a purpose for it.
So if
and
you
then
ever see your electrical outlet has like 2 prongs, and then your third one where like my thumb would be, that's your ground
Right.
for when you're wiring something, and that in your outlet will also go to a ground. And just another story that kind of is related to this, the American one. There's a guy named Wayne Laughter of House of Harlequin. If you've heard of the CBD strain Harlequin before, he found that strain he grounded 4 plants, and those became like red and all sorts of crazy colors. So he called it Harlequin, like Harlequin's outfit, where the other 4 plants that he didn't ground just stayed green and faded to a yellow. And it's anecdotal. It might be bullshit. Don't call me out for it. I've already said enough questionable things on this podcast tonight. But
I saw Wade
claims that.
talk about it on Hash Church more than once, and I felt
Swami,
vindicated about bringing it up.
I feel like sometimes there's these shared experiences, like in psychology. I learned about this. Like sometimes my brother or I would like share a story, and then I'd be like, "Wait, no, that actually happened to you, not me," or something like that. So Swami from like he goes by Gas as well, but Swami, the dude, he's like a white guy with a long white beard. He also told a similar story about grounding. So I don't know if maybe he actually did the same thing and had the same experience, or if he just heard Wayne tell the story enough times that like he thought maybe it was him who did it. I don't know, because he grows only outdoor now. So I wouldn't. I'd wonder when that would have happened.
Well, grounding is going to be so the theory, like your home electrical, you have voltage that comes in on your hot leg. You have a neutral leg, which is supposed to feed it back. Well, your neutral leg is also bonded and tied in with the ground that actually goes out down to the ground rods into the ground. So that where if there's a surge in the house, is actually supposed to feed through and go out the neutral, out the ground, into ground itself and dissipate. So the ground itself should have some type of like conduit, how do I want to say it? Conductivity, yes. And so and if we look at like what I guess dirt, soil is made up and how everything is bonded, there's chemical bonds there that electric can flow through. And so low amounts of energy can be transferred through the ground itself. Nikola Tesla, when he did his free energy, his Tesla
coil,
he actually put light bulbs directly in the ground over 100 miles away, and they were still lighting up. And it was just the current that was flowing from ground to air that was causing everything to, I guess, be a complete circuit.
It's interesting. I think the American one's question was, does the grounding affect redox?
Well, I would have to think that if it's possible, because of, what is it?
Like electron transfer, right?
Right, because as long as there's electrons that are being lost during the transfer, redox can happen, from my understanding of what these papers are stating.
Redox is short for reduction oxidation, correct?
Right.
Okay, so it's and there's a few different things, like H2O2 is one, like hydrogen peroxide, but there's a few other things that can be created by the plant, and I think even within the soil, maybe through the microbes that impact the redox. I've been trying to read the papers, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and it doesn't feel like we have a whole ton of control. It seems like at the end of the day, it comes down to like when you're watering, and watering at the proper time is really important.
Well, some of what Leighton was talking about was EH and pH within the plant, but that's just not it alone. There's more to it than just that. The plant itself within the mitochondria actually produce RSO. Oh, wait.
ROS.
Oh, exactly. ROS, reactive oxygen species. And so it doesn't.
And those are like what I was just talking about, the H2O2 and the other things.
Right. And they have different different ways that they can make it, different ways that the plant will do it itself. Some of it are like glutathione ways. There's there's just a lot of
Brandon, I
information.
heard you talk about this a little on Future Cannabis Project. I'm going to throw out a few of the other reactive oxygen species: singlet oxygen, alpha oxygen, radical or hydroxyl radical, superoxide, and peroxides. Brandon, do you have any thoughts on the whole idea of redox in the soil and what would be controlling it? Do we have control over it, or is the plant just doing its own thing? Like, how do we dial in redox? And
Well, what we're talking about is mineralization and things that fall into inorganic and organic substances. What happens is like plants feed on mineral substances, and so a lot of the chemical ions that they need, they have to be mineralized first, and then sometimes things have to be reduced, like atmospheric nitrogen, and then it has to be converted by bacteria for, that's part of the nitrogen cycle, and the nitrogen cycle is like, you can see like oxygen redox, and you can see mineralization in the nitrogen cycle if you look at that. And it's basically these different chemicals can exist in kind of different forms, and there's only certain forms that are going to be biologically available to the plants, and so they have to go through different processes to become available. When they talk about EC and pH, they're talking about a more complete picture of pH, not just where things are available on a pH scale, but also where there's a small gradient in voltage of the soil. It's a tiny amount, but it basically, what it does is it changes kind of the idea of the way that we're looking at what becomes available and how it becomes available, and at what ranges things will mineralize or fall back into a reduced form. So it's kind of complicated, and I'm taking some courses so I can learn a little bit more about it, because it's really interesting. But it basically, there's like a millivoltage that's associated with the electron transfer, because when we're talking about like things like covalent bonds and the way that chemicals form, they also transfer electrons as well. And so that hasn't really been looked at, I guess, in the past. And I didn't even know that it hadn't, because all this is really new to me. So I'm still learning. But my understanding of it is that it's not so much like the grounding force. It's just that like all these different factors will have a different I guess, change on the soil pH and, the electrical conductivity of that soil, and also the what is it? I can't think of it. What we were just talking about.
EH, pH, EC,
ROS.
ROS.
Yeah. So
I was curious if I hear sometimes, and I don't really quite understand it, but Coot talks about it a little bit, and I'm throwing this out to Brandon, Spartan, or anybody who's knowledgeable on that subject. But I hear a little bit about like paramagnetic rock dust and things like that being used in the soil. So I feel like it's kind of semi-related to this redox issue. So where does magnetism start playing in, and is that just a soil structure thing?
And soil structure and size of particles too, right?
When we're talking about kind of like forces that bind, things like to be balanced, and the number 8 is really interesting for these things, because they want to balance themselves out. So if something has 6 protons and something else has 2 protons, they're going to make they're going to be able to bond to make a balance, and so things can be built that way, and they can be like kind of taken back apart. But I think what he's talking about is, highly partically charged, and what that is probably something that has a high amount of minerals that are going to be reactive with other things in the soil.
Well, that brings my question. What if you add a little voltage to the roots?
It would have to be in millivolts. It could
Okay.
be in a
Would it be,
standard volt.
could it possibly be beneficial? Has anyone ever done experiments with that kind
I've
of
seen like a
stuff?
house plant side
Pretty
by side with
sure.
a Tesla coil.
Pretty sure there has been such things. As far as magnetism, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but like the Earth, of course, has a magnetic field, and there's like there's also differences, by the way. There's slight differences in like gravity, very, very, very minute, mind you. And same with sort of the magnetic field. But like I don't feel like, I think you'd have to like be putting neodymium magnets or something into your soil for you to get a really strong magnetic effect, or at least one that wasn't
Twisted Roots does it in his water. He uses a powerful magnet in his water to like do something to the water before he feeds it to his plants and claims that he gets good results. But I don't know any science behind it.
Well, you know, there was something that I saw that was really interesting too, which was it was a like a biochemistry paper, and they were structuring water so that they could get it to behave differently with different chemical compounds. And so it was
good
really
charge, right?
What's that?
Do they use electrical charge?
You
'Cause
know,
I can totally see that being
I
possible.
think they were using. I need to find some more paperwork or more research studies, because it piqued my interest, but I didn't have a whole lot of time to read through the whole thing, so I'll have to go back over it. But it's if I find when I find it, I'll shoot it to you guys. So you
For
guys
sure. That's interesting though. I know that there's like different forms of water, and in some cases it's almost kind of like academic to really like
I think what they were
designate the
doing
difference.
was they were completely filtering out the water, so there was no impurities in it, and then they were making the molecules of the water actually line up a certain way, so that way
Yeah.
when that water does come in contact with the chemicals or whatever it came in contact, it the way that it bonds would behave differently.
Kangen water makes those kind of claims with like tea. They say that they have like more water particles per, like, even if it's the same size glass, it breaks the water up with electrolysis, and then that makes the particles of water smaller so they could be more easily absorbed by a human or plants, is the claim.
Yeah, like Tetris, they fit together better. So yeah, it's structured water. I've seen a bunch of things about structured water, and I don't know how it would affect with nutrients and plant uptake though.
Well, you know, the fun fact is that like water is not super conductive like if it's pure water, in the way that like 99% of the time the water we interact with has some impurities in it. But yeah, I'm not saying you can't make it
That's why it's called
happen.
electrical conductivity, right? I mean,
Right.
EC is if there's like CalMag, you put CalMag in there, now there's EC. When it's RO, there's no electrical conductivity, or it's really, really, really low. And that's why
doesn't-
pH isn't
Definitely
stable.
insulated in a different way.
Some people say they add tap water so the pH will be more stable to the RO water, because the RO is so clear, whatever, clean, that it makes it fluctuate quick.
Yeah, Dr. MJ does a good job describing how like adding CalMag or anything else will help it with your budget of EC and preventing that pH swing so dramatically. So I think definitely adding stuff before you start adjusting pH, if you're using RO, is responsible to do, so you don't end up wasting a whole jug of pH up and down.
Yeah. Yes. I heard my name. I'm like, wait, that was my name. I got lost.
Doc, we're
in chat.
calling. I was gonna say Kyle didn't get a chance, but he just signed out. He said he has a slight emergency to attend to. So shout out to Predicative Breeding. That's pbreeding.com. If you're looking for feminized seeds, Kyle. I tried to give you a shout to jump in earlier, and you missed out. And sorry for that, buddy. We love you very much, and appreciate your input whenever you do get a chance to talk. And next time, hopefully, we'll go over the root binding and pre-flowering things. Spartan Grown, how are things going over there in Michigan for you?
Everything's more the same, just still doing the same kind of thing. Working good at work. News for there was we just won a contest. Powerside was holding the Big Mom contest, and they
Well earned.
Yeah, they used me for the picture because I was the tallest guy around. So I'm 6'2", and that plant makes me look like nothing, man. It's ridiculous.
I mean, you have the face for it too. Come on.
Yeah, for sure.
Make sure to go check out Spartan Grown on Instagram. If you're not already following him, follow him, but check out that plant because it is truly, truly impressive. That plant is massive, grown through the rafters, grown through the lights, but they probably still got hundreds of healthy cuts off of it. And man, that
Oh,
was
yeah, we
quite
took-
the plant.
We
Well,
took
Scott is-
100 or 200. We took about like 200 cuts off it right after that picture, and it looked like we did nothing to that plant. We ended up cutting it down, but yeah, it's in a 10-gallon pot in cocoa. So there's a power of cocoa for you. That was in a 10-gallon pot. Having to water it twice a day.
Crazy.
Gallons and gallons twice a day.
Yeah, I saw that picture. That was pretty dope. That was probably one of the biggest indoor plants I've ever seen.
We were like, when they announced the contest, we were just like, are they really going to, we're going to just grow it to the ceiling. That's what we're going to do. We're just going to grow it to the ceiling. Screw it.
I think they're so awesome, like how fast they grow. I think I already mentioned this before, but I do like that. I actually have a small subject to discuss, just a small one I wanted to mention. I received some pictures from somebody, and maybe we'll screen share it. I don't know if we can do that. Would that be possible?
I'll make you the host here in a second, and then you can. All right, Matthew, you are officially the host. So you should be able to screen share. When it pops through, I'll let you know. How's Lucky doing over there, Brandon, while we wait for Matthew?
But you know, he's being okay, but he wants a lot of attention right now. So I'm just feeding him some exotic bird seed, which will
There you go.
be available soon.
Here we go. I can see the, now it's full screen. I'm not sure if it's shown up on YouTube quite yet, but it looks like a plant with some black stuff crawling on the side of it.
Yeah, can you identify what that is?
I guess I would have to zoom in to see it a little closer. Are those bugs? It looks like a fly of some sort, perhaps.
They are bugs. They are spotted lanternfly nymphs.
Oh no. Where's this at?
This is in where is this actually? I don't remember. I should have gotten that information before.
Not San Diego, California, I hope.
Not San. No, this is Pennsylvania. That's right. This is Pennsylvania, which is the spotted lanternfly epicenter. Since 2014. So, I've talked about it before. You know this very well, Jack. Everyone on the panel knows this pretty well. But I just thought I would put a picture to it because I know that some people out there have said that they've never, especially even if they live in Pennsylvania, haven't seen spotted lanternfly on any cannabis. And I'm here to say that not only did I call it, it's also very unimpressive for me to call it because this thing eats everything. So it's not really, not really surprising.
And it's a known hemp pest, right?
It is a known hemp pest. There is Chinese literature on the subject from the 80s. But yeah.
That plant looks healthy. What do? Do they eat the actual plant? Do they suck juice? What's their frequency there?
They are sucking plant pests, so they are herbivores. They're kind of like a big old aphid. They're a plant hopper specifically, Fulgoridae.
They devour crops. If you have large enough numbers, they will eat the actual entire plant, like most of it, or until it dies.
They'll suck all the phloem out of it, and they'll desiccate it from the inside out. And they feed on grapes. They feed on various stone fruit. Like over 25 different families of plants are affected, and many, many, many species. And they like the Chinese sumac, which is Ailanthus altissima, and it's also called the tree of heaven, and it's everywhere in North America. And it's really good for the spotted lanternfly because when it feeds on the Chinese sumac, there are alkaloids that it takes up and then sequesters in its body. We were kind of talking about sequestration with plants, and the same thing happens with their herbivores. So yeah, and luckily I don't think there are any viruses or pathogens explicitly documented associated with the plant hopper, but that could always change. Who knows? Yeah, so this is
They
one
seem to be a
picture.
big enough problem on their own, even if they don't vector other disease.
Yeah, and this is another one here. So yeah, these are just the nymphs. But I would be surprised if the adults would feed on them, even if it's only incidentally as well.
I just want to throw out there for anybody who is likes to make the separation. I personally put cannabis and hemp in the same category, and as far as IPM is concerned, if something feeds on hemp, I'm just going to go ahead and assume it's going to feed on cannabis. But Matthew, maybe you could
I
correct me if
absolutely
there's.
agree with that. I totally agree with that. The difference is, well, it's because I even use this sort of and people should use this way to like sort of assess whether something might feed on another thing. If the thing it's feeding on is like a close relative, then it's that much more likely, but not always. Especially if the pest is a generalist.
Like the hop aphid, for example, I was like, well, that will probably feed on cannabis as well if it gets over.
Well, interestingly, I don't think there are any. I don't think there. I think that like Whitney Crenshaw of Colorado. He's an entomologist who's been working with cannabis pests and specifically in hemp in Colorado. Um, but and I think he was talking about how they actually haven't been able to find the hop aphid to go after it, even though hops and cannabis are the closest related species in the
Rosales?
no, in the
Or
Cannabaceae.
Cannabaceae, yeah. Rosales is another one in the thing. But thinking of that, is how different is the hop aphid from the cannabis aphid?
It's like it's hard to say because there's not a lot of research on the cannabis aphid in particular, despite us knowing it for like 200 plus years, and we've been growing cannabis for a very long time as humans, right? So, but it's pretty close because so they're both in the same genus Phorodon. There's Phorodon humuli, which is what you're referring to, the damson hop aphid, and then there's Phorodon cannabis, the cannabis aphid. So the cannabis aphid, as far as we understand, is a specialist on cannabis only, and Phorodon humuli, the damson hop aphid, actually feeds on hops, but it also has an alternate lifestyle on stone fruit, particularly of the prunus species. So your nectarines, your plums, that kind of a thing. And that's interesting to me a lot because aphids, there are tons of different aphid species out there, and there are a couple of different like theories about their coevolution with plants, and it's kind of like the two main camps are that they tend to like they co-evolve with their plant host. So it's surprising to me that one of those two species, and there's other species in Phorodon, by the way, and some of them are even possibly not species because we haven't found them since like they were first documented, and it was back before we did like genetic analyses, and morphological traits were even then kind of hard to be sure about. But the damson hop aphid has this sort of alternating lifestyle, and the cannabis aphid doesn't. It's kind of weird. And if we look at cannabis's sort of ecology as well as we know it from like maybe 19 million years ago when we think it speciated from a common ancestor with hops to like now, and all the things that have happened in that time, it's just kind of interesting to me because we think that cannabis originated in the Eurasian continent, and possibly there's some research that thinks that it was in like what's now like central China, in like the Qinghai area, like around the Tibetan plateau. It might have not been exactly there, but like somewhere in that area, the vicinity. And this is also the origination point for the spotted lanternfly, for that matter. But like hops, for example, Humulus genus, it's actually expanded out a lot, in some ways more than cannabis as far as we've been able to tell. So
Is that in part at all to human breeding, like people making beer or growing and cultivating hops?
well, that definitely played a part, but even before that, I think there's more evidence for Humulus crossing into like the North American continents pre-humans than there is for cannabis. I think there's some subfossil pollen remains that might be cannabis, but the thing is that because cannabis and humulus are so similar, it's very hard to tell the difference between their pollen even.
I want to take a second and just say peace out to Brandon Rust. He just had to get going because, like I mentioned at the top of the show, he owns Bokashi Earthworks, and he's some orders, and he's got a commercial facility that he's running during the week. So Brandon Rust, you can find him on Instagram at Brandon Rust or at Bokashi Earthworks. He's a great dude, very generous with his time and his knowledge. And thank you again, Brandon, for joining us this week. Matthew, your point with the Forodon cannabis versus Forodon humuli reminds me of Chefo MJ just sent us a video in the panel little chat, the Cheap Home Grow chat we have. And I'm always like proud of myself a little bit whenever you agree with my pest identification, because I was like, he was thinking it was like a spider mite or something else. And I was like, it either looks like a predator to me, it's moving a little bit too fast. And I'm thinking like it's cucumerus-esque. And then he said he thinks it might be cucumerus, or you said you agree. And I was like, yes, if I'm like identifying shit the same as you are, I'm doing a pretty good job. And then he sent me something saying it might be cucumerus or Californicus. And those are both Neocilius family, which I learned today. So they're related. So it makes sense that they actually look fairly similar. Californicus, in my experience, are usually more red, but I've found photos of them where they're not. So could be both.
Yeah, they're very small, and the food that they eat can definitely influence, or what they're not eating, even if they're not eating plus rather than eating, definitely influences their color. It's Neocilius is the genus, not the family, not to be pedantic, but for anyone who's
Yeah.
trying to look more into them, I just want to make that small correction. But I
It's
also want
important
to
though.
say I loved the interaction that I saw there, because one, those soil predatory mites are so common. People ask me about them more than any other organism. And no pest gets as much attention as mold mites and soil predatory mites and foliar predatory mites, which is great, partly because they get to learn that it's usually an ally, not an enemy, and then also because it means that they don't waste their time and mental and physical and emotional and monetary resources and temporal resources taking care of this thing that's not a problem. So I really like that you guys had that exchange, and yeah, you were totally right on the money.
Feels good, man. Tao, did you have something to say there? It looked like your block was lighting up.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it's all right to be pandemic, whatever you said. It's good to have the little bit of
Pedantic.
yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Specific with your words, I think is what it means. But it's important in science because it's actually the classification. It's like family means something. It doesn't just mean like, oh, there's this family, or like my family, or like whatever. Like family is a very specific, like family, genus, whatever. It breaks down the
Subfamily,
kingdom,
Species, yeah.
species, all that.
order. Yeah, it's the arthropoda, and then you've got you got the pancrust. Yeah, right. Yeah, the pancrustacea, then the arthropoda, and then the class Insecta, and then you've got the Acari. So then you have the Arachnomorpha, and then you've got no. Well, I was going to the insects, class Insecta. You were talking about mites though, but yeah, it quickly becomes arcane.
Yeah, definitely. And gotta love some of the difficulty with pronouncing some of these words, but we try our best, that's for sure. Let's see. I got a message from MedFit. How you doing over there, MedFit? Your battery died. Oh shit, we lost MedFit. Our honorable guest, his battery died. He's getting his charger, so hopefully he'll be back before we do our final shout outs. I'd imagine that he will with modern technology. His charger should be able to get him going within the next 27 minutes here. Spartan Grown, I know you're going to be here for maybe another 10 or 15 minutes or so before you give your final shout out. That's maybe new to me, at least, Spong. It looks like you've got one of those mouthpieces from Moose Labs on there. Is that what I'm seeing up top? Yeah, it is. Okay.
Yeah, I've been telling everybody about these. I love these things. So it's just a little mouthpiece. I don't know if I've gone through with you guys or not. It's a little rubber mouthpiece. You've actually talked about this before, so it turned me on to it. It's got a little paper filter on the inside. It's actually a carbon filter. They look like this.
Oh, neat. Very neat.
It's like supposed to prevent cup cough.
So there's actually like lanyards clip on. This clips onto like a thing and goes around your neck, so you could carry it around to events or whatever. Put it in each piece. That way you're not hitting the same thing everybody else has. Another thing is I've put joints in here, and it could act kind of like a roach clip. That's pretty cool. You can even put it through a joint. Just to give you an idea. So when they start looking like this, kind of dark at the beginning, this is a brand new one. And then take it out and flip it over and look at that. This was through a bong, and it's still got that fucking dirty. And it was like 24 hours, but it was 2 nights of smoking for me in this bong, and in 2 nights it got that dark.
It
So
doesn't filter out the taste though. That's what a charcoal filter seems like it would do.
no, no,
Okay, good.
and everything seems the same. I was the most surprised that it didn't even affect the draw. I was expecting it to be harder to draw with that, but it's not noticeable to me. I'll just put it that way. Maybe it affects the draw slightly, but I don't notice it.
Some people have said it makes the draw easier for them. If their mouth doesn't form a great seal, that it's a little bit easier on your mouth to.
Yeah.
Some women I've talked to that have used it personally like it for getting a little easier draw off of their pieces or getting a better seal. So it's definitely a cool thing. I think Moose Labs is the company who makes it, but there's probably imitations out there now. The mouthpiece, like PEACE, like peace on earth, man.
Yeah, it's spelled a little bit different. Yeah, it's made by Moose Labs. But I was so surprised that it got that filthy in 2 days when I'm filtering through water. You know?
What do you think about those chillums or whatever? The like, or at the very least, like cooling the mouthpieces and or like smoke.
So this bong has a pinch, so I fill it up with ice, and I love it. So this whole thing can be filled with ice, and it'll just cool off the. For one, the ice cools off the smoke coming through it, and also it kind of melts and cools the bong water, too.
So if that mouthpiece gets that dirty, is that something maybe that you would use like, at least for me, I wouldn't want to have to buy those filters all the time. So maybe I'd use it at like cups or at events, and then at home, maybe I'd just go without it.
I bought a sleeve of these at the bong shop, I guess I'll call it, 10 for $8. It's not
It's
even
not bad at all.
I'll go buy filters. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, if it's cheap, then whatever.
Does it feel like your
Pretty cool.
lungs feel a little better? I mean,
Dude,
considering,
this-
there's a lot of cook.
I just got them. I maybe spent a couple weeks with it. So, I mean, I haven't noticed a huge difference in my lungs, but I've been smoking pretty hard lately too.
I love all the like stoner tech. I just got my wife a Puffco for her birthday, and I know everyone shits on them. The atomizers break, whatever. I'll fucking buy a new atomizer every week if it means not lighting a torch ever at the house, because I don't want to light my cats on fire on accident. But, and even like an e-nail, I have 2 cats that are kind of young and crazy. So if I had an e-nail that was just hot, they can like run into the cord and yank it onto the ground and then break the bong, catch it on fire. It's just like there's other options too. Like I looked at the Dr. Dabber switch, which is a little bit bigger, not as portable. Gets really good reviews though. And then there's also the Focus V Carta, but the temperatures were all so much higher and the temp ranges on that. So I'm just glad though that there's more companies coming out like making technology, whether it's a little silicone mouthpiece like you've got over there. I've got a little silicone cover from a Colorado company. I can't even think of the name because I hated the product so much that you use to clean it with. It was Resolution, Colorado. They make this like gel. It's like Solution 420, but it's like a gel. And they also make like a silicone cap that you'd put basically like how you see Spartan's bong. It's got a little green silicone thing on the top. Imagine that, but like snugged over the top. And then you have one that goes over your bowl piece, and you can shake it up with alcohol and salt and dump that out. Because personally, their solution, like it's really soapy and you have to rinse it a bunch of times. But I definitely recommend the caps for anybody who has glassware and wants to clean it, because it makes, if you have a sealed piece, it's a lot easier to not like spill dirty bong water alcohol on yourself, which does not smell pleasant. Anybody tips for cleaning glassware or anything that they like I hear like DC glass cleaner or Solution 420, Solution 710, things like that.
I just use alcohol and salt, but I'm sure all those other cleaners are better. I'm just a simple kind of guy, and I just go for if I can go to the store, that's the biggest thing for me. If I can walk into a store and buy it, that's what I want to do. I don't want to have to go special place, shit online. I don't want to do any of that.
On that note, I
Yeah,
saw someone
I'll
use
say-
Dawn, like extra like 4X grease fighting dish soap, and I was like surprised that they just washed it, let it soak for a little bit, shook it up with some hot water, and dumped it out, and it got like it was their dab rig, even like that really hard like chunked on there stuff, and it came off. So sorry,
Yeah,
Tal, I cut you off.
utilitarian chemistry. That's why you make the big bucks, because you make this one thing that like will be instrumental and like is great because it's inert or it's not reactive at all or it's super reactive or whatever, right? But for me, I like this isn't quite about glassware, but I do want to say that for people who are using atomizers, be careful. Certain models are held together with materials and glues and other sorts of things that maybe don't have the greatest level of care or quality control associated with them. And I would hate for somebody to have a problem there.
I have a direct example of the one that you don't want to buy for flower vaporizing. I love Vapor Brothers. They make the Vapor Brothers VB1. They have since 1991. It looks like a pencil sharpener, like a little box on your desk with a whip that comes off of it. There are a lot of imitations from 50 to $100. Some of them even have a little digital readout that says, "Oh, this is your temperature." It's one, it's not accurate. Two, exactly what Matthew just said. That company, Vapor Brothers, bought all their competitors and tested their products, and they found a bunch of them. Almost every single one has horrible chemicals and resins and literally poisons that once you heat it up and you start inhaling off of it, you're going to be getting nasty ass shit. So sometimes it's not worth saving the few bucks and getting the off brand. Like going with the one that actually makes it with a good, clean product is it's your medical device. It's worth investing a few extra bucks to get the safe one.
Yeah, this is not an official endorsement or anything, but I use a paranormal DNA 250C is what it says on here in the chassis, and it's got a titanium bucket, and it does have a ceramic heater or heating element, but it's separate, and you can separate the bucket from the device from the mouthpiece, and you can soak it in powerful alcohol or something like this, which is what I do because I have access to it. But also, I have a friend who uses a sonic cleaner, a jewelry cleaner, a sonic jewelry cleaner. And has anyone had good situations with that? Because he has had amazing results, he says.
I've seen someone use it. They have one that's like, they worked in a dental field, but it's like sonic, and they just put like their bong in there and it like shoots stuff up in there. And I think it's just water, but it's sonic something, and it comes out crystal clear every time. So I haven't looked into it too much. Tao, do you have any more information on that? It sounded like
Not on that one, but I didn't even get one yet, but I was planning on. But what I was gonna say earlier is I use glass, and alcohol is my go-to. But you want to make sure you don't get the 50% alcohol. And I have had some nasty ass pieces, and if you soak them overnight, they still didn't get totally clean. Just keep soaking them and rinsing them out really hot water. It'll get anything looking like brand new. I mean, you can get
agree with
things
that.
back to new. Yeah.
you can even boil some pieces if you just want to sacrifice like a shitty cheap pan. Like
Yeah.
boiling it in hot water will get a lot of that stuck stuff out. I squirreled a little bit. I had a thought that I wanted to bring up, and then I totally lost it. Spartan, it looks like you had something you want to say.
Yeah, I was just gonna jump out of here real quick so that I could use the bathroom. So I'll just sign off now, I guess.
For sure, brother.
Just want to shout out to everybody on the panel. I love coming. I love doing this. So awesome hanging with you guys, and awesome in chat, talking to chat as usual. And bros loved everybody.
Thank you again, Spartan Grown. You can find him on Instagram at Spartan
Peace out,
Grown.
Spartan.
The Michigan Bros Grow Show comes on in about 20 minutes, so you'll be able to find him there. And many other shows, GML show on Friday, and he does shows with people over in the UK and all over the world. So find him all over the YouTube cannabis content space, future cannabis project as well.
Yep, all over. All right, guys, thanks a lot. I'm out of here. Oh yeah, I think we're having. I should probably say that. I think we're having Will on the show tonight. So we're talking old school TGA. He's kind of taking over after Subcool. So we're gonna kind of see where that's headed.
The dank, because TGA is Miss Jill, and she will actually fucking send cease and desist letters to people that use TGA.
So Subcool seeds or whatever that was called, the dank. Yeah, I think it was the dank.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but yeah, I'm excited to see Will, and I think Miss V, Queen V, Meds will maybe join him. But if not, look forward to seeing you there later, Spartan Ground. Thank you for joining us.
Grower loves,
Thank you guys. Grows love, man.
Doc, do you have any tips for cleaning your glassware or smoking devices or vaporizers in general?
Crap, man. No, I mean, that's why I come to you guys. I usually use ISO, to be perfectly honest with you. Sometimes some Epsom salts in like a bong or something, but now, I mean, I get into my little handhelds with like a paper clip and hot water, a little bit of ISO.
I'll say this, pipe cleaners. You know, those like actual fuzzy things
Yeah,
with
I
a little
use
piece of
pipe
metal.
cleaners.
Those actually work well for cleaning pipes. Like when I was a kid, I was always like, why are these called pipe cleaners?
Imagine
Like
that.
any pipe, like a water pipe, you would think like as a kid, like a plumber lays pipe for like water to go through, but it's actually for like smoking pipes. So I didn't find that out until like a few months ago, and I saw them like being used to clean tobacco pipes and shit.
Yeah, they are. I mean, you ruin them when you use pipe cleaners to clean your cannabis pipes. But I have pipe cleaners, and I will get in there with some of like the larger pipes that it's tough to get like anything else down into. You need the pipe cleaners to be kind of rigid though. If you're kind of like scraping off inside, you know, the head of a glass pipe around the bowl or whatever, they can't be like too flimsy. So there's a nice sort of, I'd rather have a paper clip usually for in those spaces. I can't imagine paperclip was the answer you were looking for though there, Jack.
No, hey, it's cheap home grow. Anything that's available locally is usually the best option in my book. If it's something simple that you have on hand, that's all the better than going out and getting something fancy. If it's effective, then that works.
Yeah, but just on the pipe cleaner things, there are good sort of pipe cleaners online, but make sure that you're getting like rigid ones because a lot of them now are sold for arts and crafts projects and they're really kind of wimpy. You want one that's actually made for cleaning pipes.
Totally agree with that. It does seem to be like pipe cleaner became a general term for like wire with fuzz and not like something that can really
Yeah.
like excoriate, you know,
This
like
is
really
another
get in
thing.
there.
Yeah, I think the main market for them, I mean, I think the arts and crafts market for these things is probably 100 times the people cleaning pipes with them market.
I completely agree.
Yeah, so that's what they're sort of being designed for and everything else now.
Damn elementary school art projects, fucking everything up for the smokers out there. I'm just kidding. It is definitely interesting that that terminology still exists because it's like so rarely that they're used to clean a pipe. So interesting. I've actually seen them used to train plants. They're actually not bad at that. You can tie it around the bottom of your pot and use it for like low stress training, like you would twisty tie or something like that.
Yeah, we are still on the like speaker view or something on the YouTube. I don't know if that's a problem for anybody, but we're usually on a different view on YouTube.
I'll go back to Brady Bunch style, aka gallery view. Or you know what? Matthew is the host, I think. So you might have to click at Matthew at the top right.
Oh yeah, let me see here. How do you want me to change it?
It says speaker view or gallery view, and I think we should go to gallery view because people like seeing all of our logos, even if we're not talking, I think.
Oh, okay, let me see here. Oh, and I'm also the reason why Medically Fit wasn't
Able
in
to
the
join.
chat.
He's like, hey, Jack, it says waiting to join. And I was like, I don't see it waiting to join, man. Like I resent him the link and everything. I was like, maybe he went to the wrong meeting.
How long has that been? I feel so guilty.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's just a minute or two. What's up, Mad? You're muted.
Yeah, just, trying to get back on.
You made it before shout out, so you mission accomplished.
I got a quick question from MedFit. So where
Yeah.
did they learn of Redox first? Was it in humans, plants, or in a vitro dish? Yeah, I
Probably
think-
in like a flask sometime a long time ago.
Honestly, I don't know, Tao. Like, I don't know where they found it first, or if it was a human, or if it was in plant.
I snubbed them.
Stumped the Med.
I'll get the Google out. Thanks, Med. Thanks for sharing all you do, Med. I love you, dude.
I loved your episode. Everyone should watch the fucking talking shit with Eagle 202 episode with Medically Fit and
Smiley's Garden, who was in the chat with us.
Yes.
He was
Yeah, we
dropping some
didn't
Redox knowledge.
we didn't get to talk about it a whole lot because Redox goes into these oxygenated species, which really affect every part of the plant, from the salicylic, jasmonic, and ethylene pathways to seed germination to plant auxin signaling. Just it goes so deep. So.
They can be very anti-herbivore, but believe it or not, there's even some insects have enzymes like catalases that I think break down peroxide, and so they can have like an anti-ROS defense even. So they've even developed countermeasures, believe it or
You're
not.
telling me my H2O2 wash might not be effective for all pests? Damn it.
I think it's in the small quantities that they feed on plants with, but yeah, maybe
Yeah, I
not.
heard someone talking about fusarium like blowing up after they hit it with hydrogen peroxide.
Oh,
Was
that's
someone there for
interesting.
that? Yeah.
I believe that if you wipe out the good stuff or even
Yeah,
like
perhaps.
the average population, then the bad stuff that's sticking around can multiply and conquer.
Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah,
can see
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's the issue with some hospitals, not to like equate plants to humans, but when they're like completely sterile and then you get these people, they get exposed to any
Super
little
bugs.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it gets really bad. Like MRSA, I think, was formed in a hospital, like medicinally resistant staph infection or something like that.
Hmm.
No good. That's definitely not fun stuff. We have a small panel tonight, so we still have a few minutes before the sign out. I am definitely tired. Had a long day over here today working, but I hope everybody is doing well through these tough times. I know it can be difficult for a lot of people, and I just hope that everybody's staying safe and able to work if you want to and are able to. And just shout outs to everybody on the panel for making it, because I know during these times, every single minute is valuable, and you could be using these hours to go out and work or spend time with your family and loved ones. So I really appreciate you and the people in the chat and everyone listening here together and kind of coming together as a little community.
Yeah, I
Despite
wanted to
everything
say
else.
something sort of, I had thought about saying something sort of like that before the show today, Jack, just to, you know, we're going through an interesting time as a country for a lot of different things, and we're heading into a really contentious time. And, you know, there's a lot of division, a lot of other things. So it's nice to be able to have someplace, a community, and really sort of embrace shared values and think about our common love of sort of growing cannabis and get away from some of sort of the toxic energy that can be swirling around sort of any election season at this time, and with the pandemic and all the rest of that makes it worse. So I encourage everybody. I've been trying to keep everything that we're doing at Cocoa for Cannabis sort of friendly, and you know, have a space where we can have good community throughout some other stressors that are going on in our lives. So I appreciate you guys creating this space, and I appreciate you know, everybody showing up here to talk cannabis every week.
The that sentiment, I agree with that totally. I definitely feel a catharsis when it comes to being able to interact with people in the way that we do, especially the regulars. E, just the letter E apparently. Smart Poker, Mr. Bagseed, Purple Thumb OG, Ian. I'm seeing all these people, Ant Grows, who I've all seen the chat already.
Sir Elhow.
Yeah, it's just really
Oh.
cool to have this sort of extended community.
I noticed the question that would be for Cocoa for Cannabis about the lighting. Did you see that? I don't know if I could go back far enough.
I'll ask a
Quite a few
random
questions
asshole.
that we were getting into about lighting. I'm not sure.
That's true.
Anybody
guy
have a
was just
fun Halloween
asking-
costume for this year? Sorry, Tao.
No,
You
no
could ask a more
worries.
serious one.
No, I got to find it now. He was asking about two different lights. Which ones would you get? And now I can't go back far enough.
I
so
think
we'll
we
just drop
probably
it.
covered that in the chat.
Okay,
I just
okay.
sort of begged out of the conversation after a while
enough.
because I didn't want to argue. But yeah, lights. I got some new videos coming out on lights. I've got one coming out this week. I have a couple more coming out in the next couple of weeks. Cool fixtures. So I will talk about that.
Do you have the numbers on the array yet? It's performance numbers.
You know, he's sending me a new model. So I got one of the models, you know, he's offering several different runs, and I want to test out this other model and sort of compare data and everything before I run. But yeah, I mean, my numbers are coming in very similar to the numbers that he's published for the fixtures. There's no sort of earth-shattering revelations. We're looking at a couple of really minor sort of discrepancies, and he decided he wanted to go ahead and do like another comparison with the Samsung White model. So that should be showing up this week, and I will test that, and then I'll be able to release it. But yeah, we're getting above 2.2 from a 4x2 fixture. It's gives a really good spread of light, and only draws what I had it at 240, I think, or 224. I have too many numbers bouncing around in my head. Here's the report. I think it's probably going to be one of the most efficient 4x2 fixtures that you can get that sort of fully lights up the 4x2 space. Power draw was 237. So it's fully lighting 8 square feet with only 237 watts, which is sort of the main appeal. A lot of people ask me to try to compare this to some other fixtures like the Mars SP3000. The Mars SP3000 is also an awesome 4x2 light, but it draws closer to 300 watts. So one of the main advantages for running the array isn't that it's a lot more light. It's a little bit less light, but they're both sort of fully lighting up that space. But it's the power savings. You're running really considerably less energy through the system like that. So it gets tough to really figure out, simple recommendations on some of these. And I'm trying to do reports that give, growers enough information about the different pros and cons of these fixtures that they can make those kinds of decisions for themselves. I think that there are legitimate reasons to choose like either of those two fixtures, for example.
I think that you're doing a great job making that information simple enough to understand, but very effective and usable for the grower, which I appreciate very much. We just hit 5:55 Pacific time on the West Coast. I just wanted to say that we're about to go into the wrap-ups. I want to offer up, you can't really see it too well. This is going to be my either Halloween or Hash Bash costume. It's the Zigzag Man, the rolling papers. I've been told I just got my beard cut, so I don't look as much like him right now, but I've been told I look like the Zigzag Rolling Papers mascot, so that'll probably be my costume for Halloween. And
you've got to come up with a prize to give anybody that gets that right, like a pack of rolling papers if they're able to predict that or guess that that's your costume.
I will probably be carrying several packs and maybe some other things. I definitely look forward to debuting that at the Hash Bash in Michigan next year. I'm doing everything within my power to go to. It's the first Saturday in April. It's been on my bucket list for years and years. It's like a free to enter cannabis event. It's been going on there for, I want to say like 30 or 40 years, long before it was ever legal in Michigan. They have a outstanding history of hash making and great cannabis growing. Being from Ohio, that was where most of our good import came from. So shout out to Michigan and the Michigan Bros Grow Show, which is about to come on. So I'm going to go through the panel and make sure we can all get our sign-offs in before they go live. So Matthew Gates, you can start.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the episode. This session was really pretty cool. Good to see you medically fit. I'm glad that you were able to come on. Again, I'm Matthew Gates, Integrated Pest Management Specialist. I just dropped a video about, it's an FAQ video about various questions people asked me about IPM. You can also find a lot of other content on YouTube channel Zenthanol, specifically that video, the same one I'm commenting in the chat with. And you can also find me at Sync Angel on Instagram and Twitter.
Thank you so much for joining us, Matthew. Appreciate your time and information as always. Next up, Dr. MJ.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks to Medically Fit. It was nice to have you on and hear about some of that. Thanks to Jack for hosting. I'm Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. We talked a little bit about the grow challenges, and we are signing up for the New Year's Grow Challenge. I'm getting really cool prizes lined up for that. It's going to be our best grow challenge ever. So start getting your grow calendars lined up to be able to grow along with us starting on January 1st. Like I said, I've got a bunch of tests coming out, the FC3000, the MyGrow Array, and the Grower's Choice ROI E720 all in the next couple of weeks. I have new videos out on that. I wanted to shout out a new podcast that I did too. I went on the Cantor podcast, a couple of guys out of Australia, and it was a lot of fun. So check out the Cantor podcast, CANNTER. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. Thanks to everybody in the chat, the panel, Jack, Shane, and Grower Love.
Yeah, shout out to Shane. He was actually in the chat. That wasn't me typing from the Cheap Home Grower earlier. That was Shane. Cantor, I like that name. It's like banter, but cannabis, CANN, implying the cannabis.
Well, I thought that was you, Jack. I would have said hello.
No, it wasn't. It was actually Shane. So shout out to Shane. He was here at the midway point in the show, at least. And shout out to the boys down under, Cantor and Dr. MJ. Thank you again for joining us. Our final panelist, before I pass it over to MedFit, the American one.
Yeah, this was great. I'm glad MedFit made it back, and always love talking all things cannabis. And I just want to mention that Canna Queen is going to premiere a show tonight. It's starting with Michigan Bro Show. But if you snap over there for a minute and say hello and give a thumbs up, I would appreciate it too. And shout out to everyone in chat. It's great that you guys show up, have great questions, and I'm looking forward to next week.
Thanks again for joining us, and shout out to Canna Queen as well. She used to be on when myself, Kyle Breeder, Adam from 2020 Mendocino, and a few other breeders would do the Breeders Collective. We're going to change the name because there's another Breeders Collective on YouTube, and all of our shows have been deleted. So whenever that starts back up, we'll have a different name. But shout out to Canna Queen. Shout out to the Michigan Bros Grow Show. Last but certainly not least, shout out to Medically Fit. Thanks for joining us. Do you want to give your sign out?
Hey, you guys, thanks for having me on the show. You know, didn't really get to discuss too much about or going into the ROS signaling of plants, but we can do that at another time. But you guys can find me on YouTube. There's a little bit of information there. Go check out fucking Talking Shit with Eagle on Eagle Gardens channel on YouTube. We did a lot of conversation there last night. So also, you can follow me on Instagram, MedicallyFit. You guys have a great night.
Thanks again for joining us, Med. Keeping it short and sweet. Really appreciate you coming and giving your plug there for people to find you. Med's got a great YouTube channel with 17, almost 18,000 subscribers. So you can go and help push him over to that 18,000 subscriber mark over there. Make sure you follow him on Instagram. Great guy, shares tons of awesome information, not with just me, but with many, many other people on Instagram. Lots of research papers, stuff that's sometimes even over my own head, which I think is great because as growers, we all have room to learn. If you haven't noticed already, I am Jack Greenstock, as you can see behind me. I'm on Instagram as well as Cannabuzz under that name. You can find me on Twitter at Jack_Greenstock. I do a podcast, Greenstock Talks, which I said I'm not going to be doing until I finish my book, but I got really fucking fired up and did a Blue Dream episode the other day that I did like half of it. So I got to go back and finish and do some editing. But Greenstock Talks will be a thing, and I've got some books coming down the line. But mainly, shout out to Shane of the Cheap Home Grow podcast. He's the one who owns the YouTube channel and initially produced all these shows, and he's having people like myself host certain shows at this point. So shout out to Shane. Much love to you, brother. I hope you're doing well, and peace and love, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. This is Jack Greenstock signing off.
Grow with love.
I can't sign off, Matthew. You're the host. You got to kill the live.
I can do it.
So at the bottom, you just go ahead and hit stop live.
You can do it.
This is where we'll pretend that we thought we were off live and said, "Oh man, wasn't the chat amazing tonight?"
Right,
That was the American
exactly.
ones I do.
Yeah.